Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. We understand that you have sensitive schedules, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And those who join us a little bit late can just go ahead and fill some of these seats up front. I'm Erin Thomas, Argonne's Gender Diversity Specialist and Curriculum Developer for this Mentoring Exchange program and cohort, which I'm happy to talk more about after our panel discussion. But this is really the meat of why we're here today. So I thought we would go ahead and sort of explain the impetus behind this panel. I'll introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to pose some open-ended questions to them, and then open it up for questions and answers from all of you. We've built in a buffer period of about half an hour from 1 to 1:30 for further conversation and feedback. So I welcome you to stay around after the panel has dispersed. Some of us can remain in the room, and we're happy to field kind of more individualized questions. So I've been at the laboratory for just over a year now and have had numerous conversations, most of them in Building 201, about our needs across the laboratory to develop, implement, and really share opportunities for mentoring, collaboration, and professional development. So several areas of and individuals at the laboratory do this quite well, and those are some of the people you see seated up here today. So as just a few examples, the postdoctoral program, human resources, the NE division, and an ESA directorate more broadly, and also the Office of the Director, have taken concerted efforts in the past year and prior to really help develop an infrastructure behind professional development. And so the goal of this panel was to really bring us outside of our respective areas of the laboratory and open this up to a broader dialogue, and that serves two main purposes. The first is that it helps you catch wind of all the great things we've been talking about and are planning for, but it also helps us do our jobs better, because with this constant two-way channel for communication, we're better able to tweak our plans and adjust according to your specific needs as you voice them. So we're really excited to share in this dialogue with you. As you can see, it's meant to be a fairly casual conversation. It's called an armchair conversation, and although we have no arms on our chairs, we really did want this to be very communally styled. So there is a bit of structure today, but we welcome you to be very candid and open with us. So without further ado, I'd like to just give a quick introduction to each of our panelists in case you're unfamiliar with who they are. And built into these introductions is a little, I think, personal description of why I've asked these respective individuals to join us today. So on my left here, we first have Tina Henney. Tina has been Argonne's postdoctoral program coordinator since 2011. And in her role, she really helps our postdocs kickstart their careers by facilitating mentoring and professional development opportunities. Tina came to Argonne as a postdoc herself, so she's intimately familiar with this demographic's professional development needs. And she's spearheaded a robust professional development curriculum that undoubtedly contributes to Argonne's recognition as one of the top places to work for postdocs by the Scientist magazine in 2011. 2012, and 2013. Next, we have Lab Director Peter Littlewood. Peter was named Argonne's 13th director earlier this year, and prior to that, he served as the ALD in our Physical Sciences and Engineering Directorate. Before Argonne, Peter served for 6 years as director of the Cavendish Laboratory at the University of Cambridge in their physics department. And at Cavendish, Peter was really instrumental in that laboratory's long-term effort to ensure that they were providing an environment that really nurtured and developed their researchers and removed barriers to career progression. So he's really seen how this works from a high-level position. And for these efforts, Cavendish was the first physics department in the entire country of England to receive an Athena Swan Gold Award, which is a notable international recognition for organizational excellence. Next, we have Keith Bradley. Keith has had a busy year. He last month was appointed as program leader and senior technical advisor for national and global security programs for the ESA Directorate. And in March, I had the pleasure of meeting Keith when I was able to inform him that he was chosen as the recipient of Argonne's inaugural Outstanding Staff Mentor Award. The award recognizes the efforts of an individual who has demonstrated outstanding mentorship and is a dedicated advocate for advancing colleagues. So developing early career staff is really part of Keith's passion and comes very naturally to him. He enjoys working in a collegial environment and building two-way partnerships. And last but not least, we have Laura Altergat. Laura joined the lab earlier this summer as a senior organizational development specialist. And in her short time here, she's showcased her expertise in leadership development, in facilitating teams, and in developing curricula to grow employees' individual strengths. Laura has decades of industry experience as a specialist in this area, having worked for such companies as Limited Brands, McDonald's, Ameritech, Abbott Labs, and Chico's. So please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel. We're really excited to have you here in our little living room this afternoon, and let's get started. So the first question, and I'll readily admit that this is a pre-posed question. We thought we'd get warmed up with something that they're prepared for, is a high-level question. You each represent different sort of constituencies here at the laboratory. You have different vantage points on what's happening in this broad professional development space. So the question I have for you is, from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for Argonne in terms of professional development? And more specifically, what are we doing well? What are we primed to really excel at in the near future? Do you want to start with Tina?
Sure. First of all, I just want to voice my disappointment and no rest for my arms, but I can get over that. Yeah, so I think it's kind of an exciting time to be a postdoc because there's a lot happening. There's a lot of momentum, much of it driven by the postdoc society here at Argonne. So in terms of opportunities for professional development as what we are already doing, we sort of have two tracks of support. We have the postdoc program office, which I consider sort of the mainstays of support to host professional development events, to help postdocs build and recognize what we consider transferable skills, and to ready themselves for the next phase of their careers. One thing that they're probably tired of me saying is that part of their job is to get a job. So in addition to having a robust research experience here at the lab, we also need to make sure that we're preparing them for the next phase of their careers. The Postdoc Society of Argonne is really the community builder, the network builder of postdocs at the lab. Recently, they've done a phenomenal job with spearheading mentoring events. Actually, the Mentoring Award, which Keith is a recipient, was born out of a proposal written by the Postdoc Society. Now they're making connections with groups outside of the lab in the Chicago area, such as the Energy Foundry, Clean Energy Trust, Chicago Innovation Exchange, Clean Tech Open. So I think in terms of future opportunities, this is where we're going to grow. We're going to grow through collaborations with connecting postdocs with these outside entities and collaborations across the lab.
No, so thanks very much. Well, thank you for inviting me. Actually, let me start by congratulating Tina and her team, actually, on producing what I think really is a world-class postdoc program at the lab. It's taken a lot of effort. It's actually, I think, sort of a really good example about how you can build things from the grassroots and you can move them up through the organization. And so I think we're learning from our postdocs and from this in a sort of really interesting way. So thanks, Tina. But from a high level, if you come down, well, why do we need to do this? I mean, if you look at Argonne, you tend to think of it as a lot of stuff. Big buildings, big machines, large computer, or you tend to think of it in terms of big programs, 100 million here, something other there. But actually, Argonne is really the people who make it run. And we're a very specific class and kind of people who come here. We've kind of self-selected. We begin to realize it after you've been here for a while, for lots of interesting characteristics. We tend to be very team-oriented. We have a kind of sleeves rolled up attitude to what we do. We're proud of the work that we do, but we don't maybe advertise it sometimes as well as we should. We're actually very good at just getting down there and solving problems. And while working in teams, we have to make sure that we don't submerge the individual. And one of the, developing those talents and developing the ability to move around, of course, isn't just technical. There are still, I think, some parts of the lab where you go and talk to them about mentoring, and they say, well, we talk down within our organization, and everybody knows what's happening up and down. And I say, well, has anybody ever been outside the building? Who do you meet at lunch? Do you know how the lab works? If something bad happened, would you know what to do next? And so mentoring is all about giving staff not the scientific tools, because they have those, but the technical tools, but the organizational tools and a way to achieve their goals. And we need to make sure that those goals and those tools are made available broadly across the lab, not just to some chosen few who've been kind of selected for and are somehow well known, but actually much more broadly, and to give people that space to move in. And this depends on you. We have to find a way actually of developing a culture that's more supportive of creativity and risk, because that's the direction that we're going. I mean, Tina was pointing out that, that you say that the thing about postdocs is the first thing you tell them when they turn up is that, you understand that you're going to have to get a job, right? So you begin very early on in the process by saying, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And so we need, with all of our staff, to begin at early stages when they come here, they're here on the first day, to begin to tease out from them, what are their goals? Where do they need to go? And I would also point out that, as many of you know, is that mentoring is tough love sometimes. It forces people to address questions that they'd rather not think about. It has bits and pieces to it of, getting people into spaces that they might feel a little bit uncomfortable with, because it will give them the skills that they need to be able to do something else. And I think, on my left is sitting a gentleman who sort of demonstrated really how to do that. And I think lastly, the thing I think we need to do about the lab, about our mentoring program, is to make sure that we have opportunities to access things which are outside the lab. As well as being internal and doing this very well, we need to have, bring in some of the training and expertise that tells us how things are done elsewhere. What can we learn from other organizations? And maybe, by the way, what can we teach other organizations? Because that's also part of our life. So, stop.
Okay. Am I on?
You are
Okay,
now.
I am now. Thank you. So, listening to you, Peter, the first thing I realized is I could have used a little mentoring before I showed up here, because I didn't coordinate what I was going to say with what you said, so there's some redundancy involved. So I'm going to change my story a little bit, but I'm also going to embellish on what you said. I think my story is mostly like a case study, and I think that's the reason Aaron perhaps asked me to join this panel. I came to the laboratory about 3 years ago, a little over that, and joined the NE division, Nuclear Engineering Division. And right away I discovered that while there was a very robust and established program in mentoring from a technical perspective, the managers were helping the early career staff learn how to do the day-to-day expert skill sets of performing nuclear engineering research and development. There seemed to be an opportunity to improve the interaction among the different staff members within the division. I believe nuclear engineering is the largest division of the laboratory. It's spread across several buildings. And it's just unnatural to benefit from the collaborative environment that a research and development laboratory provides. And so recognizing that I thought there was room for improvement, I encouraged people to sort of band together and discuss what their experiences were here at the laboratory in the first few years that they had spent their career. And it just blossomed. It was amazing to me and not anticipated that almost everybody embraced it. They loved the opportunity to talk to peers across the system. We talk often about mentoring from above and possibly from below, but there's a class of individuals now in an organization that I encouraged them to create. They did it on their own, called the Next Generation Nuclear Society. They meet regularly. They share their concerns, their experiences, opportunities that they're aware of, and they really have a sense of community that for them is very rewarding in a research and development environment. That type of environment is useful anywhere you work for a living, And it's not limited to scientists and engineers and technologists. But in this particular instance, it was clear to me that we would be even more excellent if we promoted that type of interaction within the division. And it seems so far to have been fairly successful. So.
Okay, sure. I'll continue the flow with it then, Keith. And because I took kind of a look at two different tracks, one being mentoring in terms of professional development, and just from a little bit different stance in that there is formal mentoring and then there is also what I would call informal or unintentional kind of mentoring. And I got to hear a little bit about this when I went to the Argonne Out Loud last series with Maria Stan. Any of you were able to see any of that? So one of the things I took away from that was that his children were his informal mentors in his life. So to your point, it doesn't have to just happen at work. It happens, and that informed his work in a different way. So, and that's one of the great things about mentoring is that it really does cause you to look at things differently and how can you perhaps do your work even differently. And then in terms of the true professional development side of that, I came to the lab while formal work was well in progress around some very specific curriculum that are in place for leaders here at the lab. And the one piece, and that is work well underway, and I'm sure that you've heard about that, and that is great development for the people that will be invited to that. And the opportunity that I see here going forward is that development is really professional development is really free and available all over, right? So there are lots of opportunities where you can search out a mentor for something specific that you're looking for in order to create your own development plan. And I brought some of these books just to I walked in and someone said, "Are we going to have homework?" And I said, "Well, maybe." So there are lots of lots of ideas that you can get from your mentors, from collaboration across the lab that can help inform your professional development at an individual level. So.
Thank you. So I think intrinsic in a lot of your responses was a kind of collated definition of mentoring, but I want to circle back around and get a little more concrete with what it is we're talking about. And for those of us in the room, I have a hunch that we're mostly here because we already understand the value of mentoring. We're hungry to participate in some sort of way. So these high-level responses may not be all that satisfying. Maybe that is better for a different audience, which is why we have this camera going. For those in the room, though, who now want some tools and some tangibles to walk away with, let's talk now about how effective do you think we are? So we've talked a bit about opportunities. How effective are we at providing these universal experiences and opportunities for mentoring or professional development more broadly? And what are some action plans that we have in place or that you'd like to start putting in place to ensure that indeed any one of us could walk out of here today and know exactly what sort of path to follow to really enrich our careers? So that's a big question. Tina, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay. The postdoctoral program has had what I would consider a formalized mentoring program for about a little over 3 years now. And the challenge with instituting a formalized mentoring program is getting over this initial question, what is mentoring? People do mentoring every day. You have conversations with your peers, you have conversations with people of different career levels every day, sometimes to get feedback, sometimes to give feedbacks. That's mentoring. And when you point out what examples of what mentoring is to people, then they get it, then they understand. So some of the challenges that you have to overcome or just work through when you're trying to grow a mentoring program at an institution is so you have to set some guidelines on how the program's going to work, and that is what we did, which the postdoctoral mentoring program is intended to be a third-party mentoring program, so each postdoc has a mentor in addition to their supervisor. But then you need to provide some instructions on what exactly could you do? What kind of things could you talk about with your mentor? How often should you meet with them? And so I think that's something that we've started developing as the program has progressed. Moving forward, listening to the community, what I'm hearing is now that now we need to start paying a little more attention and putting a little more focus on the mentor side, providing them with the resources that they need, either internal resources at the lab to help postdocs navigate any issues that may come up, or just general career career resources, inform them, how they can help postdocs by expanding their network. So now mentors are asking for that assistance, and how can they do their job well? I think if you ask people, everyone wants to do their job well. How we can help is providing them the tools to do that.
Thank you. And Peter, I'm going to put a little, I think, different of a spin on the question for you. Given where you sit, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as the leader of this organization about your personal role in really drilling this down, providing these opportunities, and creating an infrastructure for that.
Okay, so that's a big question. So let me add mentoring as part of what I think of as the whole framework for personal development that we should have at the lab, which I think begins with recruiting, and I keep arguing that we need to make sure that we recruit people and not roles, that we're recruiting people who are going to be working for us, are going to be working in many areas, and we assume when they come in that they may have been recruited to a particular task, but in a few years' time they may well be doing something very different, and we need to equip them first when we recruit and then as they move forward through that. We need to be training people who will become our leaders for the kinds of skills that they need to be able to lead. And in particular, I'd comment on one thing which is one of the hardest aspects of mentoring, which is actually giving feedback. As you start organizing a meeting, trying to get something done, getting a group of people together to accomplish something, we tend to view these as mechanical tasks and things which are technical tasks, things that you do, and you need to be asking yourself and getting feedback on how well am I actually doing that? How did that meeting go? At the end of the meeting, there were 5 people in the room, 2 of them didn't say anything, and so using mentoring both of you and others and of others of you to give rapid, consistent, and occasionally slightly pointed feedback in a very professional, supportive way. And actually that's one of the things that I noticed that we don't do. I've often been to meetings which were kind of nothing happened at the end of it, and it was clear to everybody that nothing happened, and everybody's sort of aware that there was something wrong about the dynamics. It hadn't been set up right, it hadn't been done right, we didn't know how it is. And you need to be prepared to do post-mortem on many of the things that you do daily. And this is the point you were making about the informal mentoring and the need for doing this. Okay. And that's a difficult skill because that often gets into areas of personal space that we're not comfortable with. Many of us here are scientists. Scientists are never wrong. Right? We just always, if we fall from 100% performance to 99% performance, we're devastated by that. But we need to be able to be prepared to take personal, correction, if you like, about, you didn't really handle that as well as you might. Let's have a discussion about how that could have gone better. And that's something that I would like to see develop in the culture at the lab, because I think it would improve how we do business a lot. And I was going to sort of move up, and my view, by the way, as we go up through the organization, I'm encouraging all of our senior leaders actually to have coaches, which is really somebody who sits there, comes and sort of observes a meeting and says, yeah, let's have a discussion about how that went, right? And so because we all need it. Okay? So how are you more effective? How do you get things done? And to have this be a way that we think about how the lab organizes and have it to be much more people-centric so that we can be more effective. Now, the other thing that I said, and Erin will know, is that I'm very keen on process, because I think it's by embodying some level of formal process in the system that you guarantee that it continues to happen. So for that reason, I think formal mentoring programs are very helpful because they're there. I mean, I think we also need to use feedback mechanisms, formal feedback mechanisms much more effectively. Through performance appraisals, for example, things like this, many of the things that you do. I've seen far too many cases of where, the performance appraisals are kind of done in the wrong order. The decision has already been made, somebody puts some input, and then it sort of comes in backwards, right? So think about the process by how you work with the people who report to you. Encourage people who you think need to be mentored to go find mentors out of the space where you are. Not everybody should be a mentor. Not everybody is prepared to be mentored, but some people can be encouraged, can be pushed, can be moved, can be helped. You can find them partners. Let me stop at that point. There's maybe more to be said, but I think
Thanks, Keith.
other people will say it too.
Okay, so I think, to answer your question, Aaron, what's mentoring, it helps to understand why mentoring. All of us have goals. Everybody we know has goals. It could be something as simple as collecting a paycheck to come home and pay the bills, all the way up to, achieving a Nobel Prize or anything or in between. Go ahead.
No,
Okay,
no,
all right. And I think if we understand that, it becomes natural that mentoring is necessary. Peter was discussing, PhD scientists and that 99% isn't good enough. We go to, those of us who have done that in our careers, we go to school, we are taught that we can self-teach, that we can learn things, we can do it all on our own, and that's not accurate. We're a community. We should be a community. There are benefits of being a community, and there's no substitute for experience. People who've been through what we're about to go through may have some insights and some advice about how to proceed and be more effective in achieving our goals. I have some pretty strong opinions about mentoring. I tend to do it informally. I was not asked to mentor. Didn't set out to mentor. Recognized the value of mentoring, and then I thought there was room for improvement. So I come at it a little more informally than, a formalized postdoc program or something of that nature. A couple of my opinions. The first one is that it's a lot of work. And I think that's one of the reasons maybe it doesn't happen. The mentors need to understand that it's not, you don't just put something in an email or say something in a hallway and expect it to have value. You have to capitalize on the relationship that you've built with the folks who are seeking mentoring. It's also a lot of work for the mentee, if you will. They need to understand that the mentor is trying to add value. They're trying to be supportive. Peter mentioned supportiveness. It's a critical element of mentoring as far as I'm concerned. And the mentee needs to understand that that's the motive behind the purpose of mentoring. I also think that while mentoring is an essential element of a line manager, it's not sufficient for us to look to our line managers to be mentored. I think some of the best advice I've ever gotten are from folks who I feel have, I can trust them, that they have my best interests at heart. Not that my line managers couldn't, but maybe I felt they were being a little too judgmental, that it was going to have possibly a negative impact on my path. And so I think the power of being mentored by people who aren't in your line management chain is a very powerful element that I've enjoyed in my career. I think the final thing I'd like to say about a strong opinion about mentoring is that everybody benefits from mentoring. It's not an early career versus a late career thing. It's not a bottom of the corporate food chain versus the top of a food chain. I think if you look back just in international politics, the heads of state who have recognized that they benefit from mentoring often do better. History says they've done better than if they believe they have all the answers and they go off without listening to what's going on around them. And so, everybody at this laboratory, especially myself, can benefit from mentoring. And I would encourage all of you to think about that, especially, but not limited to when you feel like you've reached an obstacle in your personal, professional goals. Do it all the time, but in particular, in those events, don't feel as though you can't reach out because of possibly where you are in the laboratory, in your career, or the organizational chart, or what have you. I reach out regularly.
Thank you. Laura.
So because it is, I agree with that strong stance on how beneficial it is to everyone in different parts. And I like having different mentors for different reasons, too. So I will say that my big gist statement would be commitment is the key. So as an individual, being committed to the process, the development, finding a mentor, and finding several mentors. I often reevaluate kind of my life on what I call a lineage of inspiration. So who was inspiring to me, very successful and something that I wanted to create, who in my childhood and then moving forward and now in this specific area. So I tend to have many, many mentors. Some, rotate off, but and some come on for different reasons. So to your point around not necessarily early career or mid-career. So for me, it's a commitment to always be looking for that kind of impact and insight and feedback, to Peter's point around that as well. The development model is most easily, I guess, described as 70% of what you learn at work is through your experiences and your collaborative experiences. And 20% of it does come from feedback of various kinds, whether it be formal or informal as well. And really only 10% of it comes from formal classroom workshop experiences.
So hopefully that has elicited a number of questions from you all. We wanted to make sure that we provided enough time to address a variety of questions. So I welcome you to the microphone in the center of the room here. If you came with a question that wasn't really tapped upon, I encourage you to ask it. If something that was said piqued your interest, I encourage you to follow up. Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead. Start a line.
My name is Janie Johnston, and I'm in NWM. I moved here from Los Alamos, so I have a variety of experiences at two national labs. And I come from the research house side of the house in Los Alamos, but I have a unique experience here, and I'm now on the ops side of the house. And what I've been hearing is mainly suggestions, possibly some tools. I'm not sure I can identify those tools that you might have brought out. I think you asked about them, but I didn't hear any. But anyway, the tools for the ops side of the house. I mean, and Tina, you've got a good postdoc program going. I'm sorry, I'm not a postdoc.
I'm sorry?
I'm not a postdoc.
Would you like to be? Are you within 3 years of
You're
having
recruiting.
received your PhD?
Well, I have an EDS, which is a demi-doctorate. But anyway, someday maybe I will go back for my doctorate. But the bottom line is, what mentoring programs are available for those people who actually make things happen here at the laboratory? The facility folks, the people that mow the grass, the people that shovel the snow. I don't hear any talk about that. So I would encourage you to take a look at the ops side of the house. My job's going away. I'm working myself out of a job. I'm involved in the de-inventory of the alpha-gamma hot cell. So I've been told you need to go find something else to do. And that's it. Thank you very much.
That's a great question. So,
Shall I pick that one up? I mean, so I think
Sure.
the first thing to say actually is that sadly, in terms of formal programs, what's available on the program side of the house is no different from what's available on the ops side of the house. We're in construction mode on this, which is why I'm keen on formal programs, because otherwise you're dominated by informal networks. I mean, informal networks are good, finding your own is great, having the opportunity, but this is a big lab. And we need to have teams which involve ops and programs. I mean, as you know, that matters, and we need to be able to find space for people across the lab to build those networks. So that's one reason why I think that we actually have to develop much more formal programs which give people a very straightforward route to do this. Now, actually, this group is one way of doing this, because firstly, we're asking for sets of volunteers. The volunteers come from across the lab, and we're going to find ways of joining those things up, because that should enable you personally, for example, to find a mentor who can give you guidance and who would say, it's over here. We still struggle with that, by the way, with postdocs. So, one of the things that I have lunch with postdocs fairly frequently, sort of groups of them, and I often ask them the question, well, what are you going to do next? In fact, that's almost always the first question I ask them. And I often get a response, and I really like Argonne, this is a great place to work, but I'm going to be leaving because there's no job for me in my organization. Because they think of the career progression as just going up this way, right? And we're a big place, and actually we have positions all over, and in fact, the skill set that you take from one place and move to another place really enriches the organization. I'm very keen on looking for ways to really make that kind of thing happen. As I say, the other thing is, mentoring is nice from a personal point of view. My job as lab director is to have this place be more effective, more efficient, doing a really great job. So, at some level, I don't care about mentoring at a personal level, about individual fulfillment. I believe we need to do this because it actually makes us a better place. Long and not entirely good answer yet, but what you're seeing is a process which is under construction, and I want to make sure, by the way, that it belongs to the whole lab and not just to the techies.
Yeah, and just to ground that a bit, so you can walk away hopefully feeling like you've got some touch points regarding process. So, Peter referenced this group, the mentoring exchange, which I'm happy to talk about with people after this hour is up, and what this involves and what it will grow to be. But it is a cross-laboratory group comprised of individuals from all 5 directorates. Now, the process via which people were nominated for this exchange cohort was pretty top-heavy. So division directors and ALDs were charged with nominating their staff. Moving forward, next fiscal year and beyond, we're really excited to open up opportunities for self-nomination, for peer nomination, so that the process via which we're tapping shoulders for these cross-laboratory initiatives is more robust. Another exciting endeavor that the mission support side of the house is undertaking very soon, doesn't quite help you yet, but is an onboarding program, a formalized onboarding program only for mission support staff, in which hiring managers are pairing up new hires with existing employees so that you get that kind of kickstart initiation in an informal way, but process-driven way, so that entirely operations centric individuals have that opportunity to kind of grow as seamlessly as possible into their new positions. So I hear what you're saying, but I want to sort of clarify that we're taking concerted looks at mission support. I'm mission support, so I'm always trying to make sure that we're really inclusive in the programs that we're starting off, and some of them are program heavy and some of them are entirely in operations, and we're filling the gaps as we go. So that side of the house is not ignored, but we're building this curriculum as steadily and sustainably as we can. But I'm happy to talk more about specific opportunities. And back to your question about tools, one of the reasons we were passing out these little magnets, and I think there might be more around you if you haven't gotten one, is we've developed an online repository of kind of self-starting tools for you. as individuals to access. And so the URL for that repository is on these magnets, and we can continue to pass those around. That's a great, I think, first touch point for any individual who's looking to get more involved. And we'll build up that, that repository by including our members of this cohort, so you're able to identify who from operations or who from my division is a member of this mentoring exchange, who is somebody who's self-identified as really invested in professional development, who could maybe help me get where I want to be.
And can I just quickly add, if you want to kind of fill that gap in between while we're building and kind of refueling as we're in the air, I work on a really great resource team on performance development, and there has been great success for when people kind of self-identify as a self-starter piece, come to our team, and we can help facilitate that at some level. So there's a great story that comes out of the IT world for how this got started. It actually started out in Stu's group for CIS, which has now become cross-collaboration across all the IT groups across the lab. So we helped facilitate that process while we're still working on the actual specifics and the formalization of the process. So it does, again, begin with you. So if you come to us and self-identify, and we can help you with those tools that you're
Just to
looking
clarify,
for.
who's us, Laura?
I'm sorry. I see us in the room, right? So Geraldine Becker, who is in the back, she heads up performance development, and also Nora Blackaller is also here, sitting closer up here. So that's the performance development team. Is that right? Thank you.
Can I just add one thing? So you mentioned that one of your tasks is to go out and find something else to do. It sounds like you could benefit from some networking. So I just want to make sure that people are aware that there are networking opportunities across the lab. As Erin mentioned in the description of this panel, is that there's pockets of things happening. We're just trying to raise awareness of what's happening. The thing that I would suggest is to get involved with the Women in Science and Technology group. I'm on the operations side too. So I come from the program side as a postdoc, and now I'm on operations side. So I want these things too. One, to help me be a better program coordinator, and two, to develop as an individual. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you about that as well.
Next question.
Hi. Thanks so much for coming here and talking to us. I appreciate it. My name is Ted Flynn. I started out here as a postdoc about 3 years ago. I'm still kind of a postdoc. I kind of think I'm more of a postdoc emeritus at this point, but I think that's... Anyway, I think one of the important things that to think is, you know, I've been going to Tina's meetings since, you know, my first week here, and one of the things, you know, is how to be, some of the things I've learned is how to be a good mentee. How do you take advantage of these opportunities that you have? And I think that's a very important thing to teach especially early career scientists. How do you, you know, kind of take ownership of your own career needs and actively seek out instead of waiting for people to come and tell you what to do. But I think one of the important parts that I was thinking about what you were saying is how, especially for postdocs, when you come here, it's your job to get a job. And in one sense, I wanted to know your opinion on when you evaluate the people who hire postdocs, those senior scientists, the postdoc supervisors, how much of their job is it to get their postdocs a job? Because in a sense, that's an important part of being a mentor. And I just is that considered at all in evaluations, or is it just more of kind of metrics? Well, you know, my postdoc got this many papers, and that's where it ends, or is it, you know, them calling, you know, if it so happens that there aren't any opportunities here at Argonne, at other places, reaching out and talking to other colleagues. How much of that is considered when you're evaluating senior staff?
I'll give you my answer to that, which is what I'd like to happen, and I won't guarantee it always happens. I like to have a view of a performance appraisal of a supervisor where supervisors should be rewarded for the success of their staff. Success could be papers. It probably means getting a job. It could mean getting a job somewhere else, not getting a job here, right? So, and I think many organizations, and because we do appraisals at different levels, many divisions do take that attitude to that is what the job of the managers are through it. I can't claim that it's all of those. You know, again, it's part of my insistence on process of getting questions like that into the performance appraisal. So the answer should be yes. I think, no, the other thing that you should know, as an individual, you need to be prepared to push your supervisor to questions where you may not like the answer. Because it's actually very hard for somebody to say to you, gee, I don't really think you're going to cut it in this area. I recommend you go and try and get a job somewhere else. Nobody likes to say that. So as you say, you made the point, I think, about being a good mentee, right? And one of the things about being a good mentee is training people that they have to ask those hard, uncomfortable questions to which the answer may be a little bit difficult. But it also, frankly, puts the supervisor on the spot. Look, in my view, having come out of academia, having had graduate students and postdocs, I always considered it part of my job to get them a job. Right? And my own experience, by the way, is, I've benefited enormously from supervisors throughout my career who've got me jobs, because I've actually never really applied for a job. I'm enormously fortunate, and it isn't because I'm a genius, actually. It's because I've always had very good relationships with the people I've worked for, and they felt it was their responsibility to move me to the next stage.
Or their benefit.
To their benefit, right? Yeah, maybe that's right. So there's many of those things. So a lot of what you want, actually, is somebody who will advocate for you by saying, I know so-and-so, bumping into somebody else in the hall in some other part of the building, saying, I have exactly the person for you to take on this role. That's where you need to get to, I think. So sounds like you're sort of there. I hope the postdoc emeritus is going well.
Ted's being a little humble. He was one of our director's fellows. But yeah, that's a good question, and I'm glad you asked it. And that that's part of our vision for the future is to provide some guidance to supervisors on what it means to be a postdoctoral appointee or a fellow here, what that entails, and how they can help.
Next question, please.
This is a little bit of a follow-up to what you were just saying. So we've talked a lot about mentorship, which I've experienced is awesome here. But what other professional development opportunities are available? I become aware from time to time of classes at HR, and I've taken some of those, and they've been really good, but they're not on my radar very much, and maybe that's my fault. But then what were you just talking about? Is that something that's available to people? How would they go to get it, and does it require a cost code?
Well, what I was specifically referring to were more of the informal pieces where you could write your own development plan and that kind of thing. This book, and I did not have time to check with Geraldine to see if we check these out, but because this is her personal copy, I have my own personal copy. It goes through things like these are some kinds of development opportunities that you might consider for yourself. The one that I had flagged early this morning was if you want to work on diversity, managing diversity, for example, as one of your development, here are 100 things that you could do that you could put on your development plan. Work for a year for a charity and do these kinds of things. So there is input into, the kind of development that I spoke to as about free development, no cost code, that you take responsibility for yourself. So the kinds of inputs are here. I think a lot of times what happens is it's hard work for a manager, specifically in that pipeline, or even a formal mentor sometimes to understand what are some of the inputs that can go into a specific development opportunity. So that's what I was referring to. But we do, to your point, we do have a rich array of electives, I call them. I don't know if you would refer to them as electives. Anybody can opt into those courses. Some of them do have costs and some of them do not. I think next year they will not because the budget will come out of HR. So you'll be seeing more about those. Those are the formalized programs. Does that answer your question? Okay, good. And I'd be happy to talk with you more after as well.
Okay, I see 2 people in line, and we have time for one more question. So you two can
Uh-oh.
fight about it. But we also, again, have this nice buffer period, half hour, where some of us are going to come off stage and stay. Some of us, unfortunately, have to leave, but I'm sorry about that. So let's get to our last question, please.
I'm Yasin Merjimek, a contractor at Argonne. I've heard Director Peter talk about coaching, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more, because I feel like coaching is coaching towards a specific goal, like it has a direction, like a mission. I'm being coached towards my goal to become or to do or something like that. Mentoring feels to me more like a behavior, like a day-to-day something, and it's lacking that direction.
Well, I mean, the difference between mentoring and coaching, frankly, is that coaching's more expensive. So typically, coaching often involves working with somebody who really is a professional, for which you need to find a cost code. Right? Yeah, I mean, so and indeed, coaching is, typically very specific about trying to, modify your behaviors, right? So, change the way you come across, understand how people see you, all that kind of thing. Much of that you can get informally from mentoring, but actually often working with coaches, they're professionals and they understand this very well. And my view of coaching actually is that we can probably afford to do it for senior managers. They're going to have to pay for it out of their own cost codes. But the reason that it's necessary is it should make them much better for the rest of you. So the aim is, of course, to find ways of improving the performance of organizations. If we had a lot of money, we'd try and make coaching available as far down the system as we could afford to do it, because I think that is often something. But by the way, coaching requires really serious commitment from the person being coached. And what I find most of the time actually is that if I approach my senior managers and say, let's discuss coaching, they say, what have I done wrong? Right? There's this. And that's often the response one gets about mentoring in general. You have to break down that and see this as a positive and supportive experience. Other people have. So Laura, you know more about professional coaching than anybody here.
Well, I was just thinking that makes it a part of that kind of systems thinking and how we see that as very holistic to the lab. And then we coach the few so that the leaders of other leaders then do permeate it through the culture.
And just to kind of button up that part of the conversation, I also wanted to push back a little bit and make the point that mentoring can have a very concrete or skill-based goal, and some of the toolkits to kind of drive any mentoring relationship towards something very tangible are up on that website that I referred to, that's on that magnet that hopefully you each got. I just want to conclude by thanking our panelists, and also to reiterate that this is meant to be the start of ongoing dialogues, and if you're really hungry or thirsty for more, there's a lot going on this week in this space of open forums and conversations about professional development, about the laboratory and how we're moving towards growing our people even more. So tomorrow, for instance, we have our dialogue with the director. This can be on any topic, not just professional development, but certainly if you have lingering questions for Peter, feel free to bring them tomorrow to the APS. And on Thursday, great timing, we have an ongoing conversation about navigating the promotion process. So another obvious facet of professional development. I'm getting thumbs up from some of our hosts because I got your back. Yes, see, we're collaborating here. So again, this is meant to just be the start of an ongoing series of two-way communication amongst us. And we open it up now for kind of off-the-stage conversation. I'm sticking around. Tina, I think, is staying. Keith. And Laura, so Peter, I guess, is leaving us.
Sorry. By the way, it would be much more fun to be here. I can't remember what it is next, but it won't be as interesting as this.
So thank you all so much. I want to go ahead and send you back to your days if you have to leave, and we hope to see you soon.